One Piece has never actually given an official in-story ranking of the 5 elders, but while some fans might think that they're all equals, I am personally 100% confident that they are not, but that among the elders, there is one who ranks above the rest. This is because this is something that happens with essentially every organization in One Piece. When Kaido's crew was first introduced to the story, we immediately heard that the Beast Pirates had 3 top officers, who were known as the Calamities. At the start, these 3 men were seemingly presented as equals, with no one ranking above the others. But as we learned more about Kaido's crew, we discovered that it was King who was actually his true right-hand man. This was not only literally said by Kaido himself, but King's with regard went even further, where it refers to King as the crew's top officer and the head of the Calamities. But King is not the only hidden right-hand man in the story. This exact same thing also happened with the Whitebeard pirates. While the story explicitly said that the different division commanders were not ranked, just like with King, the story also later signaled Marco out as Whitebeard's right-hand man. Marco, however, arguably went even a step beyond King, where he was the one who actually led the Whitebeard pirates after their captain's death. This is a One Piece dynamic that pretty much happens with every organization, where the story always wants to wait before revealing who the true right-hand man is, where this has been happening all the way back since the East Blue. This history makes it in my mind a guarantee that this will also happen with Imu and the 5 elders. But further, I am more than confident that Imu's top man is Saint Top Man Workery. Most One Piece organizations use some kind of unique ranking system to determine who is the strongest officer. I already brought up the Beast Pirates, and how King as a higher playing card than Queen or Jack also turned out to be their superior. Sometimes, these ranking systems are also really simple, such as with Baroque works, which just rank the officers with numbers. With the Gorosei, however, things are a bit more complicated. If you ask me, there's 2 different systems that could be used to rank the elders. First is their planetary order. Each elder is represented by a planet from the real-world solar system, but interestingly, the way these planets could be ranked would be by measuring their proximity to the sun. There is also an alternative idea, which I actually prefer, where it could also be based on their proximity to Earth. What is interesting though, is that no matter which ranking is used, Saint Workery would rank as the top elder. Everyone watching this video is probably aware that Mercury is the planet closest to the sun, but because the solar system is in constant rotation, Mercury is also the planet closest to Earth for most days of the year. This is also a fairly compelling ranking system, where Saturn was the first elder to be taken out in the story, which follows an incredibly old One Piece tradition of the weakest enemy officer being taken out first. But conveniently, the planet Saturn is also the one that is the furthest from both the Earth and the Sun. However, there is still the second way the elders could be ranked, which is the order they almost always appear in the manga, where from left to right, the elders almost always start with Saint Jupiter and end with Saint Saturn. What backs this idea up is that this is also the numbered order seen on the elders' different magic circles. Yet, wouldn't this mean that it is in fact Jupiter, not Workery, who is canonically the number 1 elder, and therefore Imu's likely right hand? I do not think it is impossible for Jupiter to be the highest ranked elder, but personally, I think there is also a lot of evidence that Jupiter cannot be that high in the pecking order compared to the other elders. This is because in several scenes throughout the story, Peter is seen acting inferior to his peers. When the elders during Wano are discussing the Nika fruit, Jupiter is seemingly the least knowledgeable about the subject, where he is asking the others for more information about the government's history with the fruit. Jupiter is also notably the elder, who most often loses his composure, where when both hearing about Shanks' meeting with Whitebeard or Garling's promotion, Peter lost his cool and got anxious. Workery himself is not immune to these types of scenes either, where for example, he lost his cool at Morgan's at the end of Wano. But personally, when looking at all of Workery's scenes throughout the series, he to me demonstrates a very different constitution than his colleagues, where I would argue that Workery is both the most confident and the most independent of the elders. By the way, since you've watched this video so far, definitely subscribe to the channel, because I have a lot of incentive to put out way more content than usual this winter. Back when the 5 elders were first introduced in Chaya, Workery is actually the only member of the group who gets signaled out, where after their big spread, Saint Valkyrie gets his own extra scene observing Luffy's bounty poster. I would argue that this is something that later becomes a theme with Valkyrie's character, where he often gets excluded from the rest of the elders. When the Gorosei years later have another meeting at the end of Dressrosa, just like during their introduction, Valkyrie gets his own extra scene, where he puts Akainu in his place. When the elders fight Luffy on Egghead, Valkyrie again gets special focus, as he's the only one who manages to do anything to Luffy, and is the only one who keeps chasing him off the island. When the elders later gather to take out Emmet, it is yet again Valkyrie who takes the initiative, and he's the one who attacks the robot. Valkyrie isn't the only elder who gets his own exclusive scenes like this, but he's definitely the one who gets them most often. I would also argue that Valkyrie has one very noteworthy moment in the story that demonstrates his special place in the world government, which is that he is to date the only celestial dragon who's been confident enough to speak up against Imu. In every other scene, the celestial dragons are glorified yes men, where they are clearly terrified of Imu and always do their best to please him. When Imu however decided that they were going to destroy Lulusia Kingdom, Saint Valkyrie actually had the balls to object, where he tried to persuade Imu by telling him that there were a lot of people on Lulusia. This actually gives a very interesting glimpse to Valkyrie's character, where he actually isn't heartless. While it's easy to think of all the elders as evil monsters like Saturn, some, like Valkyrie, have actually shown that they have a tiny bit of good in them. After Jinbei resigned from the warlords, Valkyrie was actually sad, because he realized that Jinbei had played a vital role in nurturing harmony between fishmen and humans. There is also another interesting scene in the final saga, where after hearing that Sabo was likely going to be caught up in the destruction of Lulusia, Valkyrie has this very solemn look on his face. Naturally, Topman Valkyrie is clearly still a bad person, but I think the story is at least setting him up as a more complex figure than Saint Saturn. If I am to return to that earlier point about the numbered order of the elders, while it is still possible that Joe Peter is the man in charge, it could also be that because there is an uneven number of elders, they could be ranked in a different way, where perhaps the man who always is at the center of the group is the leader. Naturally, with the way this video is going, I probably don't need to tell any of you that the one almost always placed in the middle of this group is Top Man Valkyrie. If there's one last thing that indicates Valkyrie's role as the head of the elders, it could be his role as the warrior god of justice. If we go by real-life standards, the elder who would wield the most influence would probably be Saint Ethan as the warrior god of finance, as in most current-day governments, the Minister of Finance is often second only to the Prime Minister, yet One Piece could use different logic. The reason why the warrior god of justice could well be the highest ranked position is because justice is the philosophy the world government's entire rule over the planet is based on. This is essentially the right the government uses to act as the world's police force, and how they deem everyone who goes against their interests as being criminals. The One Piece story during Marineford also makes a very literal point that in reality, the one who holds the most power is justice. In this sense, Valkyrie's position is almost religious, where he is the world government official in charge of their rule to decide what is right and what is wrong. This could actually be another secret good guy moment from Top Man. Maybe he's the one who keeps vetoing Chopper's bounty to be so low, where even if they're criminals, Valkyrie doesn't think it's just for pets to be targeted. If there is anyone to challenge Valkyrie's possible place as the world government's number 2, I honestly do not think it is any of the original elders, but Saint Vigarland Carling. This could essentially be a very recent development, where Imu after Egghead was so disappointed in the elders that he now not only has made Carling the new warrior god of science and defense, but also his new right-hand man. But I actually do not think this is likely. The man to blame for the Egghead incident, really 110%, was Saint Saturn. It was Saturn's mission to go pacify Egghead and the Vegapunks, where the other elders were simply called in by him personally as reinforcements. Saturn was also the one who originally was in charge of Vegapunk, where Vegapunk studying the forbidden history, sabotaging the Pacifista, and failing to neutralize Kuma all happened under Saturn's watch. Saturn was also the only elder to remain behind on the island to pursue the Straw Hats, after Emmet blasted the others away, yet Saturn failed here as well. And most importantly, the reason why Emmet even became a threat in the first place was because Saturn had secretly kept him from being scrapped for hundreds of years. While Imu has this petulant childish streak, he has so far seemingly only punished Saturn for everything that happened, and there isn't yet any real evidence that he's mad at Workery and the others. If we are listing failures, however, I would argue that Garling failed worse back during God Valley than Workery ever did during Egghead, where Garling both didn't manage to eliminate the Davy clan, but also actually lost to the pirates on the island, while Emmet at most scored a ring out against Workery. One last possibility that I'd briefly like to discuss is that maybe Imu does have a right-hand man, but they aren't any of the elders. We know that Imu treats some celestial dragons differently, as for example, Gungo has her own special title and is also allowed to enter Imu's private chamber. Like Gungo, there could also possibly be some hidden character above the elders that has not yet been fully introduced in the story. Yet, I seriously doubt that this is the case. It has in several scenes been made very clear that the 5 elders are the highest ranked celestial dragons, meaning that they're officially above the gods, knights and everyone else. It is also extremely doubtful that there is some hidden character above them, as when Imu has his most important discussions related to the world government's plans, there is no one else in attendance, except for Imu and the elders. Interestingly, despite their status, I still do not think any of the elders are survivors of the Void Century. The elders are actually people known to the public, yet despite them being potentially hundreds of years old, Ivankov, after hearing Sabo's story, thought it was unheard of for there to be anyone alive from the Void Century. Furthermore, when the elders encountered Emmet at Egghead, they did not actually recognize him as a figure from the Void Century, but simply as the robot who had invaded the Holy Land 200 years ago. If there is any conclusion to this video, I guess it simply is that Imu more than likely has his own right-hand man, just like every other leader character in the story, but that most of the evidence is also pointing to this right hand being Saint Topman Workery. I also think this is preferable to something like a relative newcomer like Garling being revealed as Imu's right hand. The original elders are incredibly unique characters in the story, where they've been influencing the world's affairs for literal centuries, which is something that can't even be said for any of the Yonko. There's also the fact that these are old-school One Piece characters, introduced all the way back in Jaya, which at least to me, gives them way more gravitas than characters like Garling and Shamrock. Still, this is all just my take. Maybe it will actually be revealed that Imu all this time was actually Simba, who went mad with power, and Pumbaa is just trying his best to help his genocide-crazed friend. I can't be the only one to notice that, out of all things, Imu decided to decorate the empty throne with lions. Or maybe that's just a reference to Imu being a pussy. If you want further proof of this, you should probably watch this video, where I break down Imu's true gender based on the original Japanese text. Huge thanks to all my members for their loot. I hope this video managed to continue my daily upload streak, but if it didn't, it's probably because I tore my esophagus during a previous recording. Voicework and me really don't get along. Anyway, I'm really grateful to everyone who watched this video all the way to the end.